It's been 9 years. It's been 9 years next month. So
Crazy.
We got an anniversary coming up. We've been through a lot. Starting it, everything that's kind of been in the last 9 years. And this is our platform to come and be able to have these conversations about, what we did to start, what we do now, and just have all these lessons learned. Obviously we have notepads, taking notes from each other. And so it's a big part of it. So look, it's 2020 when we're recording this. It's January. People are starting businesses. People are taking inventory of their current businesses.
Yep.
If you're a sales professional, you've looked out on your year and have made goals for your year. You've also taken inventory of your previous year. So I think it's only relevant to open this platform up to talk about the start, to talk about, one, what does it mean to start a business, and to go down that rabbit hole.
Yep.
One, why the hell did we start a business, and go down that rabbit hole. For us, what industry? Why insurance? And that's different for everyone, right? Everyone that gets in to what they're doing, there's obviously they've ended up there, whether it's a passion or an introduction or a relationship or whatever it may be, and go down that rabbit hole. So really, the dialogue that I wanted to have with you guys today is just to, why did we start a business? Where did that conversation start? And for those that kind of are looking and had an idea of, hey, I want to do this, or hey, I've been really thinking about this, or they jumped in 2 feet first and now they go, I'm here.
Oh shit.
Now what do I do?
We haven't said oh shit.
Yeah.
Or how about this? And we'll get to each one of these phases, but to highlight kind of what we can go into dialogue about is, hey, I started a business. It's just me, but now I have to hire my first key employee. And what does that mean? How do I manage that from a cash flow perspective? How do I manage that from, a delegation perspective? What's too much? Where's that balance? What's the right time to do that? And have those conversations because, the start's one thing. It takes a lot to open your doors, create a corporation, LLC, or whatever it may be. But man, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And obviously for us, we would all look around and say, gosh, it's a rich journey. It's a fun journey. But man, at times is it challenging.
I'll start. I think the first of the year is obviously this ritualistic time where we all kind of take inventory of where we're at. How'd it go last year? What are we going to do this year? Some call it goals, some call it New Year's resolutions, some call it strategic planning, I think is what we call it. But I think it's a great time to hit what you're saying, Tay, because I think when you start an enterprise or you're going to start an enterprise, I feel like there are multiple ways to take a temperature gauge of what you're really doing. I think a lot of people start out with grand visions. I don't think most people don't start an enterprise to do something small. I think they want to do something big usually. But I think there's a dichotomy between wanting to build this big business and what's practical at the time when you open it, right? I think there's this huge gap of wanting to build the next Uber and then actually I need to go out and get a customer.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times entrepreneurs and operators are so concerned about their mousetrap in the beginning and what sets them apart and what makes them different and how they have this special secret sauce, when I think you haven't earned the right to do that yet.
You haven't got started.
You need to get a pen and paper out and a cell phone, and you need to call every person in your network and see if you can earn some business. And even if you do it exactly like the next guy, you're going to give them better service than the next guy. So until you've done that, it's all fun and games. You can get in front of a whiteboard and talk about how you're going to do all these fancy things. But I can't tell you how many times I've met people in the last however many years that they have this grand plan, but they haven't gone out and got a customer yet, and there's an art to doing that. Number one, have you done that in your past? Number two, can you do this in this next phase of your life? And if you can prove that you can go out and get a customer, then okay, let's talk about, these grand plans that you have. But I say all that to say that I think it's about priorities. Like we do it every year when we do strategic planning. We have 3 areas of our business that we take inventory of. Number 1, we look at infrastructure, right? How does our infrastructure come into play with our priorities for this year's plan?
And infrastructure meaning
staff,
our team,
it could mean office,
systems,
it could mean technology. Yeah, exactly. The infrastructure, the bucket where everything's poured into that allows you to fit the capacity of the sales that you're looking to grow to. So if you want to grow to a certain amount, if you want to grow to a certain level of sales, does your infrastructure currently support that? Because usually you have to grow infrastructure first, and then you fill it with sales, not the other way around. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. So we take temperature and say, hey, how does this look? How's our infrastructure fit with our plans? Is this the year that we're going to invest a lot of money in infrastructure, or how's that fit in the 3 along 3? Number 2 is cash, right? An entrepreneur, an operator, or anybody looking to grow a business needs to have some cash. We know how to run a business with no cash for a long time.
Or start a business with no cash.
Yeah, and it's very painful. But when you get to the point where obviously you have staff and you get to the point where you have other people's mouths to feed between your own, and you can't just look at each other at the end of each month and go, hey, I guess we're not taking paychecks this month, which is that you do it in the beginning. But when you get to the point where you can't do that anymore, cash on hand is obviously a very big one. And then the third is just owner's comp. It's like, how much are you gonna pay yourself this year? Is this the year that you're gonna take some fruit? And as much as that's taboo to say, anybody that's looking to start a business or start an enterprise, or a professional that's looking to level up, at the end of the day, you're doing it so you can have some fruit, and taking that fruit is important. So those are the 3 that we take inventory of, and all of them are in direct conflict with each other, really, most of the time, right? That's why we measure our priorities. We say, hey, from 1 to 3, what does that look like? And then based on those, when we take our vote, because we vote as a leadership team, then we build our strategic plan around that. So when you look at somebody who's starting a business in the beginning, I think figuring out what your priority is the first part, because we get lost in, all this stuff that's fun until the gun goes off and it's time to go to work.
Right.
And you get lost because your priorities weren't practical. They were just...
What do you mean fun? Like, you mean creating a logo, buying a website, telling all your friends that you're going to start a business?
Absolutely.
See that I want to spend some time here because, to acknowledge what you said, right? You said, hey, take an inventory of what's important to you. Acknowledge the different things that you need to prioritize and then decide. And I would even actually disagree with you. We don't vote in our partnership. We have conversations, and we've never one time voted to where we say, hey, Rod and I disagree with you on this. So it's 2 to 1, and that's what we're doing.
That's true.
And I'm proud of that. And I think when we get into this, we'll talk about business partnerships because we've had a unique journey.
There's a strong why behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, gosh, man, if we ever vote, then we're probably need to come back the other way. So
it's a good point.
That said, something you hit on about is the start. So you get excited, you have this idea, maybe even you go as far as creating a logo, maybe even you go as far as looking at spaces, maybe you pay for a web, right? Like there's all these things, and guess what those things don't do?
They don't move the needle.
They don't move
get
the
the
needle.
phone to ring.
They're not custom.
Not one thing we did. We didn't do any of those.
Yeah,
things.
so why don't you talk a little bit about that from our experience, right? Because if the majority, or there's some people out there that says, hey, look, I kind of laugh about it because I think starting a business is anything but sexy. As far as, so I personally wasn't shouting at a mountaintop that, hey, I think this is really cool, we're starting a business. It was more like, hey, I'm kind of really scared that we're starting a business, but I'm also super excited about it. And so talk about, sometimes maybe that could be asked backwards as far as for most people.
I first of all think you recognize, you talk about our anniversary coming up, February 11th, it's going to be 10 years, but really we're going on 15 years of being together, right? So we're going on 15 years of sharing philosophy or rewiring things that we were maybe taught, that we modified a little bit, that we believe together versus what we were taught or what we believed before we worked together.
Sure.
I think it's vital to recognize that, right? 15 years of learning personalities and learning each other's strengths and seeing each other in different settings and being proud of each other from a distance, or being proud sitting in a boardroom together, however it's gone. I think the first 6 years to this partnership have really laid a cool groundwork for why our partnership's been successful. And I know we don't want to jump that, but yeah, if you go back to the beginning, and then Brett, you said something a little bit earlier. You talk about momentum. You both talked about it. I think to myself, we talk about momentum all the time, right? When a month is ending, are you happy where you are, and do you coast toward the end of the month and potentially lose momentum? Or are you fighting to the bell to where you've given it all you got, you wake up the first of the next month, and then you fight a little bit of a hangover? Or are you just so disciplined and so aware that the momentum you carry through your days is so consistent and you're so aware of it that it just carries over into the next month, which then carries over into the next month? And I think that absolutely applies with years, right? I mean, you talk about we're entering a new year, and you talk about all the rituals, and in addition, I hope that I say to myself, if we've done a good job of being the example of our own personal momentum being so consistent that it just follows us month after month, it should just follow us into the new year. So I think it's important to point that out. Yep. But specific to your question on how we started, scared, yeah. I mean, and we can really get deep on me personally and talk about my contribution to this partnership as we get a little deeper into this conversation. I think it's going to be relevant for people to know how that looked, and why it looked a certain way.
Well, and I think you say that because of any partnership, you have three people coming from different times of life, different experiences, different income levels.
Yeah.
All that stuff that you mentioned.
Well, how about different priorities, but yet the three of us somehow figured out how to, if what was a priority for you, because I have love for you and because I have empathy, because I care about you, and vice versa, all of a sudden it might not have been a priority for me, but it's a priority for me because it's a priority for you.
For sure.
And what wasn't a priority for you, but was for me, all of a sudden became your priority, and vice versa. Well, that comes back to that 6 years you're talking about of having chemistry, right? I mean, you can't. That's not a science. That's not a strategy session. That's just chemistry. That's just caring about the people that you work with.
Well, I think I agree with you. And if that is true, which I think it is, you talk about what strengthens us 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years into Erb and Young is being way more aware of those things, which has allowed the partnership through the years to get stronger, better, more mature, more rounded, more thorough, right? Way more empathy, way more consideration. It's absolutely that. It's just you allow those things. You allow that time to work for you, right?
And this is relevant. And I actually want to spend time here because what we're talking about is when you go to start something, whether it be an enterprise, new venture, whatever it may be, right? So the question is why did we become partners, right? And I think as we open the doors to this dialogue that happened 15 years ago, 9 years ago, as far as when we started, there's a lot of partnerships start by, well, you're bringing in a certain amount of revenue. Maybe it makes financial sense. There's an equity split based on how much revenue you're bringing in, whether you talk about attorneys, CPA firms, whatever it may be. Yep. That's typically how a partnership would go, is you buy in as a partner based upon, the amount of revenue that you're bringing into the firm and or the amount of value you're bringing into the firm tangibly. Mm-hmm. But what was different, what we did is we started...
skill set
skills equity. Yeah, it was and you could talk a lot about that, Brett, because obviously from a piecing together skill set, I guess.
That's good. We gotta trademark that.
I'll write that down.
That's it. There's probably no better way to explain why we started, because that we would have had nothing else to go on.
That's it.
So where did we come from, right? I was a broke college kid getting done with my basketball career and didn't know what the hell I wanted to do, knew what I didn't want to do, right? You were a seasoned sales professional, making a really nice income at a different part of your career, who was in a really good groove and kind of looking to build something and knew that entrepreneur spirit existed in different capacities. And right. And so, and then Brett, you were, had been out of school, been working as essentially a contractor for another shop, another agency, building your own business, entrepreneurial, building a team.
I think it's relevant to say that Brett was realizing you weren't wired to work for somebody.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, keep in mind, before I went and worked for the insurance agency that I was working for, we had been working for 5 years prior to that, and I was an independent agent, independent contractor. We were building a business separately. So working for that agency was basically the ability to be able to continue to build that same enterprise, but be able to offer property and casualty. And, obviously through that process, realizing that could be, instead of that being half of what I've been doing, I wanted it to be 95, 100% of what I'm doing, just because the benefits that came from being in this business instead of the other. But I think people make a really emotional choice when they pick their partners. I think a lot of partnerships come about with, people drinking a beer, talking about something that would be a great idea, and the emotion and the excitement happens, and
we could crush this.
They start going about it, and they get into this relationship, and they realize either A, that there are specific skill sets that overlap, and there are redundancies in their skill sets. And redundancies in skill sets are very dangerous, because then you get into the game of who's better and who's not.
Or who brings in more revenue.
Right. And also you get into the game of, well, there's 2 or 3 of us with all the same skill sets, so we're powerhouse over here, but then we still have to hire for our deficiencies. But you don't have enough revenue to support 2 or 3 people and hire for your deficiencies. So what ends up happening is 1 or 2 of those people have to end up doing something they're not good at, which creates conflict, which creates challenges, which creates resentment. And at the end of the day, it's just team building 101. You don't want the same people. You don't want multiple people that have the same skill set. You want everybody to bring something to the table. So I looked at the 3 of us, and it was very, very powerful and very intentional about the 3 parties that sit at this table. Number 1, Rod, you had skill sets of bringing in big business. You had skill sets of going after really large accounts, leading sales teams, really honing the art of salesmanship and what that means at a really high level.
Thank you.
And none of us did. I could sell, but I wasn't working doing $1 million contracts and doing it at the level. And you had a ton of experience with doing that, and you've done it not only regionally, but you had done it nationally. So that was a huge deal. I think Taylor, you came to the table as a point guard, and you're a little bit more rigid than Rod and I. And that is a unique,
we're softening them up.
Hopefully we don't soften them too much.
and by the way, side note, this is how rigid I was. Remember when I showed up the first day of work, February 11th, 2011, and I showed up in a suit and tie, baby. That's how rigid I was. And where did I show up? Well, I showed up at our corporate office, which was also the Erb's house, which was also the Erb's bonus room, which we called the upstairs basement. So
you got to have a picture we can throw up here. One of us have got to find a picture of that suit and that day.
I remember the suit. It was a blue suit.
Yes, it was blue.
You had a purple shirt on.
This coast
which is terrible.
Didn't you have a purple shirt on? I'm pretty sure you had the purple shirt on.
I certainly hope I didn't, but I'm sure the suit didn't fit.
I remember the suit. No, the suit fit. The shirt was long.
Okay.
I remember the shirt being long.
Right.
Struggle's real.
I had like a snotty nose too. I was 23 years old. But
it's awesome.
I think that gives you a background of how different of perspectives we were coming from.
Well, but at the same time, though, think about how serious that move was. You mentioned earlier you were a little nervous, a little scared, right? You look back on it now. I mean, that may have been true, but the way you approached it, I think, speaks to the tone of what Brett was saying. When you came to the company, your skill set or your assets were that you were a point guard. No one's going to take the basketball court more serious as far as setup and formation and execution as a point guard. You came in as if to say, until you tell me otherwise, I'm suited up, I'm ready to go to work. Absolutely. And I think that's, we joke about it now. It's funny to talk about it now.
But
to me,
I
get goosebumps. That makes me proud to think back to that day and how deadly serious you took what we had decided to do.
Absolutely.
And also to piggyback as we're talking about where we were coming from and why we started a business, because I think that's important information. Like, why did you even start a business? And did you think you wanted to start a business? For me, I didn't want to start a business. I wanted to get out of college, just like every college student that gets a degree and thinks that they're going to go make 6 figures right away.
Which you could have done.
Why? Because of your skill set? No, because of you have a college degree. Way wrong.
Sure.
Yes, there were offers there, Rod, but I guess my point is that I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just, I'm going to college, and then I go make a bunch of money, and you go, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
So
right. Yeah. So I mean, but that skill set. Back to the skill set. You know, Taylor's one of those guys that you draw up the play, and he's going to execute the play. And he'll figure out a way to execute it exactly the way that it needs to be. And if a player's out of bounds and they need to come back in, or if somebody's not putting the right body on somebody or the right block, he's going to grab them by the shirt. He's going to pull them over and say, dude, you're compromising the integrity of the play. I need you to run it the way it's supposed to be run. He'll run drills until they get it right. And from an execution standpoint, as far as an operations guy, I mean, there's just, still to the day, I don't see anybody better. You're just really, really good at that.
And I think you could argue too. You mentioned my skill sets of going after big business, and I've always said, you guys have always been super respectful of what my past looked like. And in a way, in those early days, you were a little insecure, if I may say that, about the fact that, well, man, I don't come with any skill sets.
Right.
And I've said,
no experience for sure.
Well, okay, call it what you want to call it. You could say to a floor general, to a point guard, you had all kinds of experience that I didn't have, right? You were calling plays, and you were the one that had to have it right. Mm-hmm. So to your point, I think, and to what I'm trying to say to kind of underscore that and support that, your insecurity back then about not necessarily having experience or valuable enough skill sets.
Right.
I always used to say, don't believe that, man, because having the eye you've had and continue to have and continue to improve for that organization and those ops, you could argue, I don't care how good you are going to get sales. You can go get sales all day long, but if you can't support them, I mean, I lived that. I outran ops in one of my roles quick. And what did it do? It forced that company to shut down. I mean, so there's huge value in recognizing those skill sets compared to just saying, hey, you can go out and make it rain.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think that was early on was a huge advantage because we just all three brought really uniquely different things to the table. And I think my days of that early days was kind of like, hey, Brett, how's this supposed to work?
Yeah, because you were the only one with insurance experience too.
How's this supposed to work? And
well, let me speak to that.
So it was a great mix of, well, this is how I think it should go. This is my relatively somewhat experience, and then together through just collaboration of your medical background, I've done it over here. Tay's just logic as far as understanding the way that things should be as far as roles are concerned. We kind of figured it out together, but.
I think it's important to point out, though, to that point. I mean, your skill sets then were you became the student of how this business should run.
Sure. I don't think I had a choice.
Well, you didn't have a choice.
Yeah, because we didn't know.
You were the president and CEO from the get-go.
What should I do, guys?
Yeah.
But when there was an unknown, we would talk about it and we would conceptually come up with an angle. But then you dove into that angle to say, let me confirm this is the right way. I could talk about production. I could talk about service. I could talk about profitability. I could talk about, and you take that 10 years ago, we probably look like kindergartners. You fast forward 10 years, that's one of the reasons, if not the driving reason, that we've experienced I certainly don't want to make it sound like we've arrived and we've hit success, but it's one of the reasons we're on the path we're on, and our company has remained healthy, and we've been able to do all the things that we say are important because of what you've brought from the early days before February 11, 2011. There were 4 or 5 years in there where the study of this business went in.
Appreciate that.
The formation of what it would look like, all the things that used to be thrown up on whiteboards and scratched out on yellow pads at 2, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. All of that was a culmination of the skill sets you brought.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, I second that. I mean, we would have been completely lost without that direction and conceptual. I mean, in when you're talking about skill set equity, and when we're talking about really where our strengths is coming into the partnership, easier for me or Rod to speak on your skill sets, right? It was strategic, big picture vision. It was understanding really the why of why we exist. Yes, we believed in that too, but it was really in your gut because you had experienced being in a place that you didn't want to start a business. You didn't want to leave. You wanted to find a place to work that, had a culture that you wanted. You wanted to find a place to work that served the marketplace that you felt was underserved, right? And so you went looking for that and didn't find that, and had that conviction of those things coming together and saying, okay, now guys, we have a fit in the marketplace, and we also have a strong why of what we exist. You guys believe that too? Yes, absolutely. We believe that too. Well, cool. Then this is the direction we're going to run. That's where the question came. Well, we're a personal development company who happens to sell insurance, right? And so I want to go back to the start and giving, value to really open the doors, because what we just hit on was if you do have a partnership, if you are going to work with other people, really take an inventory of what they're good at, what they're weak at, how you complement the partnership that has nothing to do with financials. And then also understand that it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And as you grow the business, the reason we're sitting here today is we're choosing to be intentional about spending time together. We're choosing to be intentional about understanding what everyone has going on. And that you only have to continue that as you grow, because the reason we're doing that as you grow your business, I feel like if you're not intentional, it's harder and harder. I think there's less and less time to have dialogue and understand and to go through the scenarios and the pen and paper where you started. So all that to say, if you're going to pick partners, and what we did was to look at that. And then also I want to talk about
skill set equity.
Can we note that skill set
equity? I wrote it down, man.
Is that like one of those things that comes in like pow, skill set equity? And then like go back to the early days, right? Like because how we got started on this is like, oh, you want to get creative, build a website, build a brand. It's like, okay, cool. Like, what's your revenue look like? You have any customers? Oh, no. Okay. We were the opposite. We barely had a brand. The brand we had we were very proud of it, but it was created
with this ideology of what we thought we were going to be.
Right.
And not to jump you, but that's kind of part of your process that I want to underscore, is that we have this grand idea of what we're going to do as, we start out on this journey. But if you are so rigid to the point where you have this idea of what you are, you take the organic growth, the ability to kind of bend and flow away from your story, because what you set out to do might not be what you end up being. I mean, how many stories of different companies do you hear as they did this and then they grew it and then it came this pivotal point in time and then they went in this direction? I think that's so perfect for us, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. And I think if you could give one piece of advice, I'd be like, dude, just start and go get some sales. And just we call it Me Too business, right? If you're starting a lawn care company, I know you would love to convince yourself that you have some unique thing that nobody offers in the marketplace, but at the end of the day, in the beginning, you should be just concerned with Me Tooing everybody's service, maybe undercut them in price a little bit, and just go get some customers and do a really good job, because you take away part of the process of birthing into what you really are. The way that Erb and Young is today was not where it started.
Right.
It's almost to the opposite, right? So maybe you want to touch on that as far as the brand when we started and how it kind of grew into what it is today. But that was a very difficult time for us, because you go through an identity crisis to where you really are this thing, but you're holding on to this brand image that you started with, and there's probably a 2-3 year gap there that we held on to something that probably we shouldn't have.
Yeah,
you agree with that?
And would you say at the start, guess how many people care about your brand?
Nobody.
0.
So true.
0. Actually,
so true.
Maybe less than 0 if that's possible.
Yeah, I've really never heard somebody kick off their brand new operation and have someone call them and go, man, you got the prettiest website I've ever seen.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Cool brand.
Yeah, because no one's going to your website.
No one's going to your website.
And guess what? You have no money to get them there. And the brand thing is fun to talk about. And you had a good friend that did a wonderful job, Michael Zakarian. But if you want to talk a little bit about what we thought we were at that time and what we were trying to convey in the marketplace, I thought that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, Michael was, that's a blast from the past. What a sweetheart of a man he is. He did branding for the big 3. He's from Detroit.
Big shout out to Zakarian.
Yeah, man. Love you, buddy. He does some of the, you've seen some of the things he's designed.
Super quality.
Yeah, big 3 auto is what I'm referring to, GM, Chrysler, and Ford. I think he did some stuff for Audi, and so I mean, talk big
Erb and Young,
big time guy, right? And Erb and Young is definitely part of his timeline and on his resume. But we went to him and just basically said, we think we want to be like we want to have the feel of a law firm with the look of a country club.
Right.
We want our colors to kind of represent that, and we want our logo to be elegant and
rich.
and rich.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he knocked it out of the park. So much so that, I mean, that seal, that E and Y inside the circle that he created was, I mean, emotion was attached to it. Still is. It still is. I mean, I have throwback days all the time where I put that on.
But I remember we sat at your kitchen table and we drew out that E and Y with the seal.
Yeah.
And then he brought it to life.
Absolutely.
But I remember us doing that. That's probably very hard. That's probably why it's so hard to get rid of that for so long.
Gosh, it was like fighting music when somebody would say something. Hey, man, maybe you're not what your brand represents. Whoa, bro.
Yeah.
You know, the seal is special.
That's a fun conversation
Well,
to think about, though.
even the staff, even the
That's my
core
point.
team members, when we decided to move away from the old brand, literally the first thing they asked is, well, what about the seal? And I am so proud of that. I know you guys are too, because
Sure.
it wasn't about the seal itself. It's about what the seal stood for.
Yep.
You know, you want to talk about brand, you know, before you go ask all your customers what you think your brand is, you should be asking what your team members think your brand is. Because if your team members don't know what it is, if they're not the ones that set on it, and if at the end of the day, whatever they say it is, that's really what it is. So I thought that was fascinating, that was the first thing they thought. Well, what about the seal?
I don't remember exactly when we enlisted Michael to dial that in for us, but let's say it was within the first 6-8 months, just to have a business card to pass out at a BNI event or a networking event.
Yeah.
But you think to yourself, we did not spend a lot of time on it. I feel like we may have spent a few $1,000s.
I think it was.
He gave us an absolute ridiculous deal as a favor,
Yep.
and delivered, you know, for what we paid versus what that brand and what went into it was
Way
worth
over.
was crazy. Such an imbalance, and again, speaks to who Michael was and what he saw in us and how he wanted to help us. But
Yep.
when you fast forward to what our brand morphed into, we didn't really put time and effort and resources toward it for how long?
Right.
To your point, 7-8 years, where we just said, can we do this?
Yep.
And keep doing it. Just keep doing it.
Yep. So, and that's why you say the philosophy start with sales. You know, again, no one cares about your brand. I think we just hit that perfectly, right? So when you go out, all your customer cares about or your prospect cares about is what's their problem and can you solve that?
And who are you?
And yeah, of course, especially for me, 23-year-old coming out of college, who are you? But that's where focus on the relationship, not the transaction, came from. Was who do we believe? Whose problem are we looking to solve? And in the insurance industry specifically, the battle is to, or any business at some sort of scale, that people feel like a transaction. There's no relationship, and the benefits from a relationship, knowing a little bit about who that person is, who they are in the community, or having relationships with the industry upon, you know, when called upon, you can help someone. And so that became the basis of what we've done.
For those that are tuning in, our old tagline was focus on the relationship, not the transaction, just to catch you up to speed. So
I have a neat kind of story. I don't know if you guys even know this, but you know, you guys do know my dad takes care of horses, right? Got a huge business where he takes care of 300, 400, 500 horses. With if you saw his business card,
Yeah.
have you seen it before?
No.
It literally says Ron's Horseshoeing.
Yeah.
yes.
And I think to myself, the quality he delivers to his clients, and I'm talking expensive horses,
Yeah.
people that do this on a regular basis, who can hire anybody they want. He's become known as one of the best when it comes to these skilled horses, but he didn't go out and say, well, I'm going to start a horseshoeing company. Let me get a website up. Let me get a beautiful business card. Let me get shirts and hats and everything. Let me just get a you know, a good study in, and let me go do this and let my reputation. It totally is kind of epitomizes what we started. It's a cool parallel.
Yeah,
without really.
Totally.
You know,
It's a perfect example because, like, and especially I think in this day and age, I wrote down bootstrapping. I think there's a critical discipline that comes from. We paid $500 for our website. and we had it up for 8 years.
Oof.
8 years.
That's right.
And it was a placeholder, okay? But it got the job done. And we focused on Google reviews instead of our website. And we got natural traffic to our website just from doing a good job and getting reviews. We took that additional money and we were pouring it back into incentivizing the team to have a good customer experience so we could get a Google review instead of redoing and vamping our website. There was just different priorities that we had, but all of them had to do with bootstrapping.
How about it took us 5 years to have any sort of sign?
We still don't have a sign at the Dr. Phillips office. Yeah. We still don't have a sign that say we should really get one. We should really do that. I think it's more of it's principle.
It's a philosophy thing.
It's like, so the point is, if you're starting a business or you're looking to start a business or you're on that journey, I think it's very distracting and I think it's easy to get ready.
Yes.
And because you get to talk at a cocktail party about what you're going to do and you get to feel good about this new venture. But the actual work itself is the part that really matters. But we forget about that. And we're so busy with all the other stuff. It's such a valuable discipline to be able to remove all that noise, just like your dad does, and just go out and do a good job for people. And the point I guess I'm trying to make is with social media and the ability to be able to amplify that word of mouth has never been better than what it is today. So the real value is not look at me, let me figure out all these ways for you to look at me. The real value is getting a bunch of people to really like the quality of your work, because at the end of the day, the word of mouth is being transferred so faster than it was 10 years ago, that if you would just do a really good job with zero marketing, that is the marketing. Right? That is the marketing. How many times do you look in our groups and says, I'm looking for a recommendation for this?
Yeah.
If you're not showing up on those posts, then you're obviously doing something wrong, because people are looking for something every day and they're asking the people that they know instead of just Googling something and going to somebody's website, right? The trust level's way down the list for the brand off in the distance. People are watching less and less TV. And at the end of the day, I can get somebody's recommendation with one quick post on Facebook. So I think it's never been easier to be successful in business, but I think it's never been easier to be distracted than it is right now in business.
I think back to prior to meeting in 2006, some of my time spent leading some sales teams back in the medical field. I remember always being pounded by my team, man. We need better brochures. We need this, we need that. We need pens, we need paper. And
our competitors have it.
Our competitors have it, but we beat their faces in all of them. And I mean, I would say this if they were sitting right here, and without naming companies, there's a few people that if they're listening, they'll laugh at this because they'll remember those conversations where it's like, look, just scratch your name on a piece of yellow pad on a sticky note. Let them know you stopped by, and let them know you got to talk to them, and let all the qualities that go along with building a proper relationship or having a higher level conversation accompany that, rather than who's got the prettiest business card or the best brochure or who gives away the coolest pen,
who pays for leads.
How about that, right?
Yeah.
How about you mentioned Google reviews. Those Google reviews weren't paid for. I mean, that's
right.
So to your point, man.
The higher the barrier to entry to get the desired outcome you're looking for, the more value it is, right? So if you can pay for leads, your competition can pay for leads. But if you're going to get 150 organic Google reviews, your competition's not going to do that. So they're not going to take that away from you, and they're not going to be able to compete at that level. So you got to be careful what you want, right? Be careful what you wish for. Easy in, easy out.
And that's a mad reason to give props to our team. Our team was vigilant about saying, hey, Brad or Taylor or Mr. Jones, did you have a good experience with us? Well, man, yeah, we did. Well, would you mind giving us a Google review? I mean, there were multiple steps based on knowing how to have a conversation with somebody, knowing how to build a relationship with someone, where someone would actually take that direction given by one of our team members, and hats off for them for that initiative. And someone actually feels strongly enough about our service and their experience with us to be able to go give that review. I think that's golden right there.
Well, what you hit on, when we used to run that a lot, especially when you start a business, right? And I want to transition because we basically talked about how we started in philosophies of start with revenue, start with sales, start with your customers, start with what problems they have. And then what you mentioned about along the way, once you start serving, then you start to get feedback from your customer, from your referral sources of what they actually need. And then you can figure out how you can solve their problem.
Sure.
At first, you don't know exactly what they need because you haven't done it enough to develop that. So I think even if you have this master plan and you say, we're going to differentiate this way, we're going to do it this way, we're going to do it that way, you may get in the mode, get some sales, get some partners, get some customers, and they go, hey, by the way,
that's not what we want.
We really want this. And so to put all that time in on the front end, trying to figure out what they want rather than going to serve them and then getting enough feedback and intel, then making your processes cater to them to solve their problem is the number one issue I have with getting ready to get ready. Because by doing activity knowledge, right? We talk about that. By getting into the activity, you actually get the learned knowledge. You're a student of what you're doing, and then having enough to be able to lower the ego, say, oh, I thought it was this. I thought we were providing all this value, but it finds out that these referral partners don't want that. I'm trying to sell a steak to a vegetarian, and so.
Well, the perfect example is that when we started out, right, it's about relationship, right? We were in love with the idea of people calling up and having a relationship with your agent, and still to this day, I know some of our dearest friends and best clients are some of our good friends, and that's the part that we love, right? However, having said that, in full transparency, that's not what the marketplace said was important. The marketplace said that our business, especially on the personal line side, is based upon a lot of our referral partners and what they need, like you said. And a lot of that has to do with the efficiencies that come from closing on a home. A lot of our businesses come from that, where there was a big need where people were not getting back to people fast enough. There was no quality assurance as far as turnaround time. There was no processes built to deliver what somebody needs consistently to make sure that we help the person that's referring that business over. So the relationship, although we were putting it at the top of the hierarchy need chart, the reality is we weren't even getting the opportunity to really have that relationship because the referral partners that were sending us the business were like, hey, that's great, but all that means nothing unless you turn this around to me quickly, efficiently, and consistently over a long period of time. So what we said was, oh, wow, our value proposition isn't meeting what they need. Our value proposition needs to change. Our value proposition needs to be that everything is prioritized to where when an opportunity comes in from one of our partners, we immediately are able to process that and turn it around quickly, effectively, accurately, and make sure we never miss one. So therefore, we developed what's called the sales machine, right? We developed a mechanism and an internal process to where we have public accountability for all the leads that come into the office. And what it allowed us to do is have a turnaround time that gave a quality delivery to those partners, which then in turn allowed us to do the fun part, which is develop the relationship with the client. But here we are starting a business that has to do with selling to an insured, right? And the marketplace told us that really wasn't the need. The need was not getting to the customer and doing a good job. The need really was to get to the referral partner and do a really, really good job. And I think that's fascinating because our whole business pivoted at that point. And it's been obviously a huge focus for us. And a lot of those people are probably watching this right now that, will kind of shake their head, and hopefully we do a good job about that. But everything is revolved around that conversation now.
Well, I think you can track that pivot back to kind of what you said, Taylor. I think early on it's quantity over quality. And you're saying, I've got to just get to as many people as I can get to and explain to them what I do. And then through that exercise, you identify and then you hone in on the ones that want more. So the quantity over quality approach in the beginning is prevalent in anything you do, especially when you're talking about referrals or referral partners. But then the art becomes, once you hone in on those that seem like they want more, then you spend more quality time with them and uncover and flush out what's important to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting ready to get ready is let me get my pitch perfect.
Right.
Let me figure out exactly, and you said earlier, Brett, let me figure out exactly how I want to talk about this and exactly how I want to sell it. And I can talk about every feature and benefit.
Yes, the feature.
Right. And they feature and benefit you to death, but you're not even close to what they really want to, you're not even close to
rather
what they
than
really
asking a really good question of what they're getting that they like and maybe what's on their wish list. But here's what I want to spend time on that we hit on: how to start a business with no money. Because all the things we talked about, we talked about, we used to go to referral partners all the time, be like, hey man, love to do business with you. What can we help with? Well, we're good. We got an agency that sends us $25 gift cards every lead. Will you guys do that? And the temptation is, hey guys, can we do that? Yep. And it always came back to philosophy. It said, no, here's what we can do, in asking a good question on how we can provide. And so, oh, by the way, there was no money to pay for leads. And so I think this is one of the favorite parts about our story, but any entrepreneur that is listening or anybody that because there's a lot of advice people will give you, right? We've talked a lot about this. Start your career, go work for somebody, make some money, save your money. And then if you want to be an entrepreneur, then you can invest that money and go start a business. There's some challenges with both ways. You either start a business with little capital, organically, and that's what we did.
And you starve.
Or you start a business with more capital, more experience.
More risk.
And more risk, right? Because for us, we started our business, we scrummed together, I think, $5,000 a piece, which at the time seemed like an enormous amount of money, and invested that money into stuff that would literally just be able to get us started. So that $5,000 a piece wasn't even, hey, this is what we have to work with. No, it was like, there is no marketing budget. Like, the marketing budget is you. And oh, by the way, we're not paying you. Right? So it's like, all right, everyone is in marketing. Go knock on doors. Go shout at the rooftop. Go just to a networking group. Go play in traffic is what we now call it.
Yep.
And so because of we were able to have the benefit of not having money, which at the time seemed like anything but a benefit.
Yep.
Right? It seemed like we were so undermatched. Because you had an agency that was able to pay for leads. You had an agency that had a reputation that's been around 100 years. You had an agency that had a full staff and there was only 3 of us, right? Like
when you go to a trade show, they'd have a big, nice tent with a banner, and we'd have a table
cool
with a table skirt that didn't have any branding on it. What's some cool pens?
Well, we used to be cautious about how many business cards we'd give out because we don't want to run out, right? And so if you're going to give a business card to somebody, like, it better be for a really good reason, and you better exchange a business card and be able to connect, right?
I never knew that. Did you used to concern? Yeah.
I never run out because I don't give out business cards like that. It's never been. It's my
probably
thing,
still because back in the day, it's kind of
it's probably
primal.
It's internal. That's kind of funny. I think
he's anchored that scarcity.
Well, no, he just said that, and my heart dropped. Like, wait a minute, you didn't give out business cards because you were afraid of replacing them.
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
I love it. That's
no doubt.
Great.
And
that's
so,
raw right there.
So, like, because we didn't have any money. So for an entrepreneur that starts and says, okay, great, I get what you're saying. I don't want to spend too much time on this branding creativity. By the way, that branding and creativity stuff is super expensive if you let it be, right? So that's another thing. A sign to put out in front of your business, super expensive.
Yeah, not cheap.
Not cheap, right? So if you're starting a business with a couple $1,000s, a couple $100s, whatever it may be, or a couple $100,000, but you're entering a bigger market, it's just, where's your priority going to be? And our priority was on starting with sales and organically running to bring in those sales. And I think that is a really cool part but by doing that, we did have less risk. It naturally took us way longer, and we had to work way more hours, and we had to work way harder, and it was way more painful in the beginning. But there was no, oh man, I just invested 15, 20 grand into this marketing campaign, and it hasn't returned any referrals or leads, and now all of a sudden we're down 15, 20 grand.
And how long can I sustain it?
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of like the philosophy of, I know we've made this mistake before amongst the 100 other mistakes, but when you don't do something based on cost, and you're not focused on, well, let me rephrase that and say I'm not necessarily driven by cost. I'm looking at return. And you think about an entrepreneur that would make that mistake to not spend money based on cost, instead of focusing on the return. I think that's something that you got to be aware of too.
Yeah.
I think
Good point.
I'm glad you brought this up. I have a huge passion for this. Creativity is a small business's secret weapon. It is the greatest asset of any entrepreneur, anybody starting a business, because at the end of the day, creativity is what wins out, not money. So I look back at these events where we would have the conversations about our competitors paying $25 gas cards for the leads that would come in. And number one, our philosophy was, well, if all we're providing is $25 worth of value, then we're going to be out of business real quick
So
anyway.
forgettable.
Number one. Number two, it's forgettable. Number three, let's be different and say no. Number four, we really can't afford to sustain this anyway. So what can we do? So what we would do is we would go to open houses for real estate professionals. We would help them market. We would support their events. And in some cases, we would pay much more than what it cost to hand out
Probably not
gas
even
cards.
in some cases,
But at the
most
end,
cases.
but over the long period of time, it was less expensive for us, but it delivered way more perceived value for our customers, which was the referral sources. So creativity ended up being the asset there, not the gift card, right? So creativity, number one, is always wins out because it shows you care and it's less expensive, but also it gives a lot more perceived value than simply just paying for something. Number two, the point about being early in an enterprise where you have less risk, the way that we did it, which I would highly suggest anybody that does it, you do it that way, because unless you're getting into a business that you've already done before and you know exactly the processes, you know exactly what your metrics are, you know exactly what your return on investment is, you know exactly what your staffing cost is going to be, you know exactly what your cost of goods are, you know everything ins and outs, you know your marketing strategy, you already have customers lined up. Unless you have all of these risk factors figured out, then I'd say, yeah, you know what? Absolutely. Pour some significant capital in it and run, you know. Our cousin Kevin Greenwell is a perfect example of that. You know, like he's executed an incredible strategy from day one, and he needed to go big quick, and they did it. And it's probably one of the coolest case studies I've ever seen of somebody that's been successful. So shout out to you, man. That's
mad respect.
Yeah, mad respect. That's a perfect example of where somebody knows exactly what they need to do, and it's time for them to go, and they're going to go
and execute and work your ass off
and work your butt off. But I tell you what, that takes a lot of confidence, and that takes a lot of self-awareness, and not in a sense of I know I can do this, but actually like no, I know what this is we're going to require, and I'm confident in it. And I think that's a high level of self-awareness in somebody that wants to do that. But that's not most people.
That certainly wasn't us. Yeah.
That's not most people. And what happens is if you bootstrap it and you start with nothing and you start with little, what happens is you're making mistakes every day. Constantly making mistakes all the time. But the stakes are low. So the mistakes don't cost you anything. And you simply just pivot and you adjust. And then you make another mistake and you just pivot and adjust. And then you make another mistake and you pivot and adjust. When you pour a ton of capital into something and you pour resources and time and staff and all these different things that require, which basically take the risk level up in any enterprise that you're starting, what happens is you make a mistake and you pay for it. You make a mistake and you pay for it. You make a mistake and you pay for it. And you get 3, 4, 5 of those mistakes and all of a sudden you're in deep shit. And you find yourself on the other side of the coin where now your back is up against the wall and you're not looking at investment, you're not looking at return, you're looking at cost. Right. And now you're cutting costs based on necessity, not because of you're looking for a desired outcome.
Sure.
In our case, I look at it and say there was a lot of pain there, but I look at it and say, what if we did it the other way? What if we would have done it, we would have gone big? I think we wouldn't be here today. I think we didn't know enough. I think that a lot of us, we didn't have enough experience. And I think a lot of these mistakes that we made along the way that we don't even remember would have been extremely damaging things that we would have looked back and said, man, this put us in a really tough spot, or this put us out of the game. And Tay, you always say it enough. You can make as many mistakes as you want. You just can't make a big enough mistake that puts you out of the game.
Right.
And I think with us, the big testament to the way that we did it, that hopefully if somebody's watching that you do it, is that it allowed us to have grit, which means that we allowed ourselves to continue to get hit and keep moving forward because nothing was big enough to put us out of the game. But just on the other side, no win was big enough where we looked at each other and said we arrived, right? Right. The wins were really, really small wins. So it was tough, but the real risk was the real risk to us was convenience. The real risk to us was we had to be patient. The real risk was, we had to show back up to our family reunions and say, hey, where are you? And us to say, hey, we're just a little bit better than we were last year. That was the real risk. And that was internal conversations. And, it wasn't external big time pressure to where we're like, man, if we don't have this amount of sales this month, we got to shut the doors down. We got to close the shop down. So,
a couple things I think about when I hear you talk: ignorance on fire. right? I mean, we all can relate to that.
Yeah.
That was definitely us.
I mean, it to a point, to a degree, it still is.
Sure.
I mean, there are things that maybe the industry says we're aware of them, but we're kind of that awareness to what the industry says is secondary to where we think we're going, because we think we've simplified it, right?
Sure.
I think about the fact that we always used to celebrate base hits. You think about people that say, "Man, I'm gonna go after this because it's a huge payday," or I'm gonna pursue that account or this account or do this or do that. Well, we've just looked at it and said, "Man, just hit another base hit, hit another base hit." And it brings me to my last thing: is we celebrate everything, even the smallest wins. Remember the first annual auto policy we wrote? We were writing 6-month policy. The first annual we got, we're like, oh my God. And the price point was so small in retrospect, but we celebrated that. But what it taught us is that when we had a bigger win, and maybe this goes into when we had a higher value or a higher net worth personalized client, or we landed back then a bigger commercial client, we didn't celebrate harder because it was bigger.
Sure, that's true.
We celebrated the same because we're like, okay, that's an outlier. That potential big pop or that big win is not where we focus. We'll celebrate it maybe a little harder, or maybe we'll get a little louder,
Sure.
But we come right back to what we know is true, which is ignorance on fire. Just keep doing the simple things. You got slight edge up here, and I think to myself,
it didn't fool us into thinking that we had done what we needed to do to relax. Like you said, if you get this big win, all of a sudden you think you think that you can move out of the process. We didn't have the luxury, or anybody that starts this way, you don't have the luxury. You haven't earned the right, as you would say. You haven't earned the right to move out of the process yet. So you're forced to stay engaged and to just grind and grind and grind and grind. And at the end of the day, whether you think you've made it or not, what happens on the long term is the person that stays in the grind, the person that stays into the process.
And that process of grinding, if you think about what that really, really means, that's how do you end a month, and what do you carry with you into the next month, right? If you have 2 or 3 days left in the month or in the year, you have a big win, or you realize you're having a big year. It's like, man, this is great. No, we haven't allowed that. We haven't allowed for that. It's just
chop wood, carry water.
Chop wood, carry water.